While everyone is glued to oil charts and war headlines right now, something quietly happened inside the walls of the SEC that almost nobody in this space is talking about. And it is the single most important development for XRP holders in the last 12 months. The noise is loud. Trump is threatening Iran. Oil is surging above $94 a barrel. XRP is bleeding in the short term. And the average retail investor is doing exactly what the crowd always does, reacting emotionally to the surface level story, completely missing the signal underneath. But here is what I need you to understand before we go any further. The signal has never been clearer. The structure has never been more complete. And the people who are going to be positioned correctly on the other side of this chaos are the ones watching what is being built, not what is being blown up. So if you are in this space and you are confused right now, stay with me. Because today we are going to pull back the curtain on all of it. The Middle East, the math, and the mechanism that is about to change everything. Welcome back to Crypto Signals. I am your host, and this channel exists for one reason: to decode what is actually happening, strip away the noise, and hand you the framework to think clearly in a market that profits from your confusion. No hype, no price calls, just the data, the logic, and the structure. Let's get into it. Let's start with the hard truth that most people in this space are not willing to say out loud. XRP does not move with the crypto market. It moves against oil. And I do not mean that loosely. I mean there is a documented, mechanical inverse relationship between what is happening in the energy markets and what XRP does in the short term. And right now, with oil pushing above $94 a barrel on Iran tensions, XRP is being suppressed. Not because XRP is broken, not because the thesis is wrong, but because of the macro pressure that is sitting on top of every risk asset on the planet right now. Think about that logically. When oil prices spike, the dollar strengthens. When the dollar strengthens, emerging market liquidity contracts. When liquidity contracts, speculative assets sell off first, including crypto. But here is what the retail crowd completely misses. That pressure is not permanent. In fact, every single time oil has spiked like this and then resolved, every single time, the capital that rotated out of risk assets comes back. And it does not come back slowly. It comes back violently. Now let's talk about what is actually happening geopolitically, because it matters more than most people realize. President Trump just issued what can only be described as a final ultimatum to Iran. He is on record saying Iran is militarily obliterated with zero chance of a comeback, and that they had better get serious before it is too late. That is not diplomatic language. That is closing argument language. Meanwhile, the Pentagon is not sitting still. They have drafted 4 distinct military options: seizing Karg Island, which is Iran's primary oil export hub, taking control of Larak Island, seizing Abu Musa and surrounding islands, and blocking Iranian oil exports through the eastern Strait of Hormuz. These are not theoretical. These are options that are being actively reviewed right now. And here is what I want you to understand about how this resolves. Oil does not stay above $94 forever. The pressure breaks in one of 2 ways. Either Iran comes to the table, which removes the risk premium from oil and every risk asset on the planet rebounds. Or escalation peaks, uncertainty hits maximum, and the market forces a reset in both directions. Either way, this period of suppression has an expiration date. The only question is whether you are still positioned when it expires. Let me show you the math that the crowd is ignoring right now. Not the chart, the actual numbers behind the structure. There are roughly 100 billion XRP in total. Fixed, hard cap, no inflation. Of that, approximately 55 to 57 billion is currently in circulation. Exchange reserves, according to data from CryptoQuant, have been sitting near multi-year lows. The smart money is not on exchanges. It is off exchanges. That is not a rumor. That is on-chain forensic data that anyone can verify. Now here is where it gets interesting. Cross-border payments globally move somewhere in the range of $150 trillion annually. The foreign exchange market alone clears approximately $7.5 trillion every single day. And here is the number almost nobody talks about. Roughly $27 trillion is locked up at any given moment in Nostro and Vostro accounts. These are pre-funded liquidity buffers that banks park around the world just to settle transactions. It is dead money. It is capital that is sitting there doing nothing except serving as a placeholder so that correspondent banking can function. XRP was built to replace that. to unlock that $27 trillion and put it back to work. Not as a concept, as a live, functioning, deployed Rails system. Now here is the math that this requires. If you want XRP to serve as a meaningful bridge currency for even a fraction of that cross-border volume, let's say 2% of the $150 trillion annual flow, you are talking about $3 trillion flowing through a network that has roughly 55 billion tokens in liquid circulation. Think about what that means for the price requirement. This is not a prediction. This is not a Moonboy fantasy. It is a design requirement. The math does not lie. And the math does not care about Iran or oil prices or what the sentiment is on social media today. And that number does not even factor in the tokenization wave that is now arriving. We are looking at a $4 trillion tokenized asset market that is being built right now, today, with XRP Ledger as one of the primary rails. More on that in just a moment. While retail investors are panic-watching oil charts and asking whether XRP is dead, let me show you what the architects are actually doing. First, and this is the one that almost nobody in the retail space is connecting correctly. SEC Chair Paul Atkins just announced that a tokenization innovation exemption for crypto firms could arrive within weeks. Let me be very precise about what that means. The SEC is about to create a formal regulatory pathway that allows tokenized assets to be legally traded and settled on crypto infrastructure inside mainstream financial markets. Not someday, within weeks. Ask yourself this question. Does a regulatory body like the SEC move this fast without being certain of what the rails look like underneath? These are not people who move impulsively. The fact that Paul Atkins is talking about weeks, not quarters, not years, tells you that the framework underneath is already decided. The announcement is the last step, not the first. Now stack that on top of what Ripple has been doing in the background. Ripple's acquisition of Hidden Road, a prime brokerage that clears hundreds of billions in transactions annually, is not a publicity stunt. Prime brokerages do not get acquired to sit idle. They get acquired because they are the pipe through which institutional capital flows into new asset classes. Ripple now owns that pipe. And then you have the Digital Asset Clarity Act, which is moving, slowly but unmistakably, toward establishing a clear legal classification for digital assets. Once XRP has undisputed legal clarity, you are not talking about retail FOMO. You are talking about pension funds, sovereign wealth vehicles, and institutional custodians who have been legally prohibited from touching this asset finally getting the green light. That capital does not trickle in. It floods in. This is not retail guessing. This is smart money completing its infrastructure build before the doors open. Let me give you the specific timeline of what is coming, because this is where the urgency becomes real. The SEC tokenization exemption is arriving within weeks. That is not my language. That is Paul Atkins' language. That is the chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission. When that exemption lands, the gate that has been holding institutional participation opens. Not for speculation, for infrastructure deployment. The Digital Asset Clarity Act is working through the legislative process right now in parallel. Every step forward removes a layer of legal uncertainty that has kept sovereign entities on the sideline. And the Iran situation, as unpredictable as it is day to day, has a structural ceiling. The Pentagon's options are all targeted and contained. This is not a World War scenario. This is pressure and negotiation. And once that pressure resolves, whether through diplomacy or through a contained military action that the market quickly prices in, the risk premium on oil drops, the dollar softens, and every risk asset that was suppressed in this window comes roaring back. The window to be positioned before that happens is not months. It is weeks. The fuse is lit. The only question is whether you are watching the noise or watching the structure. Here is what I want you to think about before we close. The retail crowd right now is doing what the retail crowd always does at this exact type of moment. They are looking at the short-term price action. They are feeling the pain of the macro pressure, and they are considering doing exactly the wrong thing at exactly the wrong time. Exchange reserves are near multi-year lows. The people who are going to hold through this are the ones who understand the mechanism. The people who sell here are the ones who looked at the price and never looked at the math. Once the catalysts we just walked through begin to materialize, and they will, because they are not predictions, they are scheduled events, the supply available to meet that demand will be structurally insufficient at current prices. That is not a claim. That is a consequence of the math we just walked through together. The door does not stay open forever. It never does. I want to be very clear about what today's video is and what it is not. It is not financial advice. It is not a price prediction. What it is a framework. It is the structure underneath the noise so that when the noise is loudest, you have something to anchor to other than your emotions. The Iran situation is real. The oil pressure is real. The short-term volatility is real. And the mechanism that is being built quietly underneath all of it, the regulatory clarity, the institutional rails, the mathematical requirement for a much higher XRP price to serve its function, that is also real. In a market that profits from your confusion and your panic, the only hedge is knowledge. If you made it to the end of this video, drop the word signal in the comments. I want to know who is actually watching the structure and not just the noise. Stay patient, stay rational, and as we always do here on Crypto Signals, we do not wait for the future. We plan for it.